story like Felice can tell a story, but I can tell you how we met. But I have to go back to the Sputnik era to tell you how we met. Because I was a Sputnik era gifted kid. And that meant that I was taken from my little working class neighborhood in South St. Louis, put on a bus for an hour to go to the nice neighborhood in St. Louis, and to join a group of children there who would, for the next 8 years of our lives, be together, 30 of us together for 8 years, in a highly accelerated, highly enriched program. I knew that at that program that we were going to learn speed reading because President Kennedy was a speed reader and could read all the world's newspapers before breakfast. I knew that we were going to learn to speak French fluently because that was the language of civilization. I knew that we were going to have to learn algebra 3 years ahead of the other kids and that we'd have physics and chemistry. And that's not what I was really most intimidated by. I was intimidated by the fact that I had to stand on the bus stop every morning of my academic life with Big Mary. Now, Big Mary was big. I mean, like, I'm 9, she's 10. She stands like 5'8", and has long black hair with bangs. She's beautiful with long eyes and a long Roman nose. Okay, just think of a Xena warrior princess. Got it? All right, that's Big Mary. And I'm going to have to sit on the bus stop with her, and I did for all of my academic life. She called me Runt. So that's what was scary about it, but I did stay with the same kids and did go through one of the best educational programs, one of 4 demonstration schools in the country. I will never regret the education I got. In fact, my students say that I'm better than Wikipedia, but not as good as Google. So they taught me something. Anyhow, when I went to college, I went to where my boyfriend went to school, because we didn't get much career guidance. In fact, I'll tell you the career guidance we got, okay? Because I can sum it up in a few sentences. It was on our first day of the gifted school, Miss Mary Marcus. Here's what she said. I'll bet you children are wondering why we've given you the best teachers and the most up-to-date curriculum and the newest schools and even the newest workbooks. Well, that is because you have been given a gift by God. And she said, you've been given the gift of intelligence. Do you know why we are doing this for you? Because right now the Russians and Chinese are training their children to take over the free world. And it's your job to stop them. That was my career development. We were never told anything else, given any other guidance whatsoever. Very much like the presidential scholars, we were given this great honor, but we also got this great education. And then we graduated, and in my neighborhood, people didn't go to college, so it's lucky that I even did. And when I got there, it was the 60s, so I kind of majored in the 60s. And they always say, if you can remember the 60s, you weren't there. And so by the end of college, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do, But I'd been in some psychology courses, and I was working in a crisis center, crash pad, acid rescue place, and this psychologist said to me, you would be a really good psychologist. So, it meant I would get to spend the rest of my life in school, which I was good at, so all right, I'll become a, professor of psychology. So then I went through graduate school, which was hell. And then I did become a professor of psychology, but not like you might be thinking at Harvard or anything. I ended up you see, all the jobs dried up that year, remember? Felice and I were loosed on the job market at the same time. So all of a sudden, everything's gone. So I end up in a soft money, non-tenure leading, crappy adjunct assistant professor position at the University of Nebraska. And I was married to another assistant professor at the University of Nebraska. And one day that letter came in the mail that you will all get, and you might even get it from Felice, that says, come to your 10th high school reunion. And I said to my husband, I can't do this. I can't do this because, like, I have not kept in touch with them. They're probably like all senators and astronauts, you know? He said, well, what makes you think that? I said, because Miss Mary Marcus told us that we were the leaders of tomorrow. She said we were the leaders of tomorrow. They will be the leaders of tomorrow. I'm in Nebraska. He said, you know, be proud of what you've done. You know, you're doing okay. Just go. So I went. And when I got there, I was in for a surprise. Because I opened up the book. This is a lot like Felice's experience. I opened up that book that says, Where Are They Now? And the guys had gone on to very linear, I mean, they were great careers. Freddie, the boyfriend I went to college with and then broke up with, Freddie had wanted to be a physician, and now he was a pathologist for the Air Force. And Nick wanted to be a lawyer, and he was a public defender. And Richard tormented us with his cello, and now he's with Cleveland Symphony Orchestra. They'd kind of just gone straight. The men went straight. The women, on the other hand, not so much. More than half of them were homemakers, a few in very traditional feminine careers. Even though that hadn't been our dreams. We were unlike other kids. We girls dreamed of curing cancer and being leaders of tomorrow. Those were our dreams. But that's not what was happening. And I realized that even though I was a professor, I had just bumbled into it, you know? We'd all just bumbled along, and now, you know, half the women were homemakers, and we were all standing around there drinking at the bar, and a shadow fell over me, and it was like the eclipse of the sun. And I looked up, and it was Big Mary. And she was still so much bigger than me. And she was still scary, and now she was even like dressed in like this long white toga, so she looked like warrior goddess. And she said, so Kerr, I hear you're a psychologist. And I said, yeah, but it's nothing, it's a soft science. They always told us not to go into the soft sciences. She said, so at this Harvard of the Prairie where you reside, she said, do you do any research? I said, oh yes, I'm investigating the effects of expertness, attractiveness, and trustworthiness on client perceptions of counselors in interpersonal process situations. She said, whoa, that sounds boring. She said, why don't you do some real research? And I said, like what? She said, I want you to find out why we're not the leaders of tomorrow. Now, I always did what Big Mary told me to do. And this time was no exception. I said, okay, and I went back, and then Paul Torrance talks about this moment. I fell in love with an idea. For the first time, I cared. I wanted to know what happened to us. Why didn't we become the leaders of tomorrow? Because even the guys, I mean, yeah, they weren't senators and astronauts, but they were kind of in sort of aggressively normal careers, and the females were aggressively normal. I thought, what's going on? So I sent out a survey, just like Felice did, but I didn't have 500 people to follow up. I had 30. So I sent out a survey, and then I did phone interviews to find out what was going on with them, and it was all so puzzling. Because first of all, the women just completely denied they were gifted. Completely denied it, even though they wrote me 10-page letters about how they weren't gifted, and said things like this. Dear Barb, I don't even know why you are involved in a field like gifted education, because we all know it's based in eugenics, and that it's been completely debunked. That education did nothing for me except leave major gaps. In fact, I never got to read Homer, a lack which I feel deeply. How many average homemakers do you know who feel the lack of Homer deeply? That's what was going on. So what am I going to do about it? I don't have anybody to talk to. My colleagues aren't interested in film. One of them said, giftedness, nobody cares. Girls, nobody cares. I was like, oh, okay. Who am I going to talk to? So I'm leafing through this journal, and there's this article by this lady named Felice Kaufman, who had followed up presidential scholars, and the things she's saying are the same things I'm seeing. in my people. The same things. So on my Watts line, I decide, okay, this is 35 years ago, I decide I'm going to call Felice Kaufman. She's at this place called University of New Orleans. So I call her and I say, hello, is this Dr. Kaufman? You know, she goes, yeah. I said, well, this is Barb Kerr. I'm at the University of Nebraska. She goes, yeah, but like, who are you? And I said, well, I'm a miserable, soft money, non-tenure track professor at a third-rate university. She said, no, I'm a miserable, non-tenure track assistant professor at a third-rate university. I said, wow, I love your study. She said, I read that thing you wrote. I love your work. I said, I love your work. I love your work. Why don't we meet? So on the phone, we planned a presentation at NAGC together. And we met. I'll never forget the sight of Felice coming down the hall in a big cape, you know, and like I'm wearing some kind of, I don't know, animal skins or something. Oh, and a beret, yeah. And like we recognized each other right away, of course. Of course you're Felice, of course you're Barb. But at this speech, okay, I think this was one of our talks that we gave together, right in the middle of it, she gives her thing about how many of the presidential scholars never really understood the concept of achievement, right? So I get up and I'm talking about the problems that our people had, often keeping on seeing everything in terms of getting straight A's. And I said, in fact, one of the big issues is they think that relationships are achievements, at which point...
Wait. Oh, you got to tell us exactly right, okay?
Okay.
It's my marriage, so let me just jump in here.
Okay, go ahead.
You said that women especially look at relationships as an area of achievement, and therefore, here's the big punchline, then we can reenact the moment.
Uh-huh.
So you said that consequently, a lot of women in their mid-30s look for the adult equivalent of the captain of the football team or the valedictorian. They're always looking for the perfect person, and consequently, they let a lot of, you can tip it up.
I said, and so they let a lot of incredibly wonderful relationships go.
And I, who was dating somebody, said, oh my God, and without
She hyperventilates.
Barbara looked at me and said,
Marry him!
Police. Sorry for this little walking.
And she did, and she's...
It's the equivalent of the captain of the football team.
Well, you know, she didn't think so at the time because she was Jewish, she was Catholic, her dad might not like it, his mom might not like it, he wasn't, you know, and I remember you saying, oh, you said he's so skinny, he's Bolivian. It's just like, Felice, get over it. So that's how we met, and I have to say that she's had a tremendous influence on my life, and I often feel like she was channeling Paul Torrance, because whenever I would get off track, she'd remind me that I'd fallen in love with an idea, now I had to be true to it, and so Felice has been there through all the ups and downs of my life, and there have been a few, including the biggest whopper of a midlife crisis that turned into a good book. But anyhow, she's been there through all of it, always reminding me, stay true to your idea, because that's what Paul Torrance told her. So now I'm going to share with you, as fast as I can, the idea that I fell in love with. And it's up there. The idea I fell in love with was making the world safe for creative young people, especially adolescents. Especially adolescents. And I said, that's me with a little help from Paul Torrance, because I added some quotes from him in there, okay? So after all these other things that we talked about, I finally, at University of Kansas, came to my safe harbor where I got to do whatever I want. That's what a distinguished professor does. Anything she wants. You even get a gold tag that says you get to park wherever you want, and you know what that means, academics. And what I wanted to do, and what I'd always wanted to do, was to find out why intelligence wasn't enough, and I had a feeling that creativity was needed and some of those special characteristics of incredibly creative adults. Something about innovators. So I started the Kleos Lab to learn about, serve the needs of creative adolescents, and I wanted to do adolescents not just because I am one perpetually, but because they're at a crossroads deciding where they're going to choose. Are they going to choose a conventional life, a linear life, the life that everybody expects them to choose? are they going to choose the creative life? Their interests, they have interests, personalities, and abilities that are developing toward maturity. They're at a point now, in fact, I don't need to use the Torrance test of creative thinking anymore because they actually have accomplishments and their personalities are well enough developed that we can look at that. They already have creative accomplishments. They already have encountered significant barriers to achieving their goals. And that's where I have Paul Torrance's thing, don't be afraid to fall in love with something and pursue it with intensity. Why the name Kleos? Well, we learned, to our surprise, that our chosen acronym had an ancient Greek meaning. Easy for me to find out because my husband that I was with for 33 years is a Greek and Latin scholar. And so he said, oh, yeah, it means glory, it means fame. And he sent me these quotes. Like a natural flower, Achilles will wilt, but his Kleos will never wilt because it is not a thing of nature. It is a thing of art, a song. And the second quote is about a little girl. I have a small daughter called Kleos, that's the feminine, a Kleos, Kleos, who is like a golden flower. And then we knew we'd chosen the right name because Kansas is the golden sunflower state. So here's our mission. If I could just sum it up, this is it. Finding, guiding, encouraging, and gathering. We know from Felice's work and from my work that many, many incredibly creative people were never found. They didn't become presidential scholars. They didn't get to go to gifted school, okay? They weren't found. We have to find them. And now they're really in hiding. Let me tell you, 12 years of No Child Left Behind, they are in hiding. We have to find them. We have to guide them. I don't want this generation of bright kids to have the kind of career development I had, which is none. Everybody thinks the cream will just rise to the top, but it doesn't, not without guidance. And also, very creative people what do you want to, you know what to do if you want to become an accountant, right? It's linear. But what if you want to be an installation artist? What if you want to be a video game developer? What if you want to be a historian of organs in the time of Bach? What then? How do you do that career? Those are all, by the way, real careers of our kids. So we want them to find those invisible pathways and not get lost. We want to encourage optimal creative performance. As you'll see later on here, you'll see that many of our creative students are not ideal students, and they do suffer from a number of the sort of the beginning phases of the kind of things that are going to happen to them to adults. They're moody. Okay, there's a lot of moodiness. There's a lot of difficulty with that. A lot of procrastination because they're so smart they can put everything off to the last minute, and they keep doing that until they blow it. They're adolescents. So we need to optimize their creativity, their creative performance, so that they don't underachieve in the wrong places. Gathering. We need to gather them together in creative communities. Paul Torrance said, find a great teacher or mentor who will help you. And we decided if there was nobody else in these kids' environment, we were going to be the one. We'd be that one teacher, that one mentor. I should mention that it took 6 years to train enough psychologists for creative people. Now my psychologists are out there working for the Grammy Foundation with Music Cares. Those are the ones who work with drunk rock and roll stars. My psychologists that I've graduated are working at the art institutes and doing amazing things. But it took many years to train up that whole cohort because nobody knew anything about it. So we realized that we couldn't really use creativity tests at this point because we had a lot of information. And also, there's no way that we could test every kid in Kansas. It just couldn't happen. So we wanted to find a short, easy way that didn't require gifted educators, but that any teachers, any guidance counselors could use. So at that time, CSI and a bunch of profiling shows were popular. And so I was watching a show where they were profiling serial killers, and I thought, that's the ticket, serial killers. I'll profile creative people just like we profile serial killers. and develop holistic profiles of creative people. We know some things about what innovators are like as adults, but what were they like as adolescents? And so I set my team of graduate students to work reading every single book we could find about eminent people, going into their biographies and autobiographies to find out what they were doing, what they were acting like, what their achievement was like, what they were wearing. Margaret Mead was wearing some really wacko things that she was sewing herself. She got blackballed from a sorority because of it. Because of her clothes, she sewed these kind of like clothes that looked like they would have been fine on Samoa, where as an anthropologist she later went. Anyhow, what were they like as teenagers? So what we found is that by the time they were teenagers, it was clear that they had high, not sky high, like National Merit Scholars, but high general abilities, okay? In other words, at least B students, Creative cognition. Indeed, when Bonnie came and trained Reva and a number of people to do the Torrance figural test, yes, indeed. We found out that just like these people, they had fluency, flexibility, originality. They had creative personalities. We learned that from many of the studies of creative adults that have been done in the 50s and 60s, we learned that they always scored that the signature characteristic was openness to experience, independence, and persistence in their field. Csikszentmihalyi, Chick sent me high. Yeah, Csikszentmihalyi found that all highly creative people had a capacity for flow consciousness states. And when we read the stories of people like George O'Keeffe and Beverly Sills, when we read the stories, even Mr. Rogers, by the way, we found out that as children they were very dreamy, and lived in fantasy worlds and spent a huge amount of time kind of going into other consciousness states. They had that capacity even as teens. By teen years, these people were already developing expertise in one domain, sometimes to the detriment of their other studies. That's why so many highly creative people, like Steve Wozniak, who I got to meet, who invented the Apple computer, remember he did great? He had 2 classes he got A's in. 2 classes. Advanced calculus and electronics shop. That's it. And he told me I couldn't have invented the Apple computer if my parents hadn't gone to the State Department to make it possible for me to be enrolled in gifted math and over at the Voc Tech School, with the bad kids. Yeah. So that's what we found out about them, that they had this expertise that they'd already really invested in, and again, often to their detriment. Therefore, uneven achievement. Most of the highly creative adults were not straight A students. Some were, we found out, if it was easy. If they could do things at the last minute and get straight A's, fine, they do it. But not if it took any time away from their art, their writing, their inventions. They'd have nothing to do with it. They have high energy levels. Some psychologists call this mania, but it's not really mania, it's hypomania. Hypomania means normal mania. It just means they don't sleep as much as other people, as those of you with little babies who are going to grow up to be smart already know. Paul Torrance said, we found after 30 or 40 years, other things became more important than intelligence and even creativity. And we realized that we needed to look for more than intelligence and creativity if we wanted to profile people who were going to become innovators. We were going to have to look for that energy level. We were going to have to look for that single-mindedness. We were going to have to look for that uneven achievement, independence, persistence. We were going to have to look for that. So we developed a general description, a profile of a general creative person, a core description. And then we did a factor analysis, and never mind, we did a study in which we discovered that there were clusters that had personality, interests, values in common. Artists looked more like writers in their moods, and in their personality. Academic disciplines didn't matter what the discipline was. If people went into if were interested in going into academia, their personalities were very similar, their interests very similar. Inventors, different from the others. Inventors, whereas the performers you're going to see next are very extroverted, inventors are introverted, practical, and most people never dreamed how creative inventors were because they were hiding in their garage, doing their inventions in their garage. Performers and leaders, this is weird, because performers, leaders, and entrepreneurs, musical performers, singers, dancers, entrepreneurs, all fell into the same personality group. If you're up there expressing yourself and showing off, you're in that group. And then we found a group nobody else pays attention to. I don't know, maybe there's too many chicks in it or something. But come on, how many people have you ever heard talking about those who are creative healers, right? Think of the counselors, the teachers, the great nurses, the great social workers. Well, have you ever heard anybody say, oh, she's a social work genius? Of course not, because we reserve genius for male-dominated fields. But what we found were real clear profiles of people who had it. They were born to heal others. They were born to help each other, and they knew how to do it in creative ways. These were people who said, the kids, when we found the kids, well, we had we brought in this one group that were all profiled as healers. Sight unseen, we didn't know what they were going to say. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to go into Reiki and energy medicine. Well, the Transcendental Meditators are sending me to Switzerland on a scholarship to study TM. I'm going to be a rabbi, and I'm going to study the Kabbalah. I'm going to be a Jesuit priest. I'm going to write poetry like Gerard Manley Hopkins, and then I'm going to minister to the poor, and I'm going to develop a poetry program for people in prison. Those were our healers. Aren't they creative healers? Yeah, and their personalities, their values, their interests, they clustered together. Okay, so what do we find? Profiling works. Boy, the teachers, the counselors, everybody who says they were good at it. Now, the first year, we had some error. And that's because the first year, the principals got involved. I'm sorry, I know there might be some principals here. But the principal said, wait a minute, this group of kids that you're sending to KU from Hays, Kansas, they don't represent our best. They are not representative of our school. I mean, blue hair. We're going to send our top cheerleader and our scholar athlete too. So these kids would show up and they'd sneer at the other kids, these popular super achievers. And we wrote the principals and said, these kids may not be in the gifted program, they may not be popular. This is Kansas. They may not even be athletic. And sure enough, they got it right. After that, never again. They were right on the money. The profiles matched when we actually did the personality test, the values test, the interest test, just going on one paragraph. I should probably give you an example of a paragraph. Okay, here's a creative writer. This is what we'd say, adolescents who are going to grow up to be creative writers are achieve very well in verbal classes, English and languages, and are very uneven in their achievement in other classes. They are reported more often for conduct disorders than other bright children, but those conduct disorders and those infractions of school code usually relate to editorials that they've written or jokes or plays they've written that are inappropriate. They may be moody and have mood swings, and they might seem very cheerful one day and extremely productive, and another day they might seem very depressed. So you get a feel for that. So we gave them what kind of grades we expected they have, what their personalities look like, they're open to experience, all that sort of thing. And the teachers, they'd say, I know that kid. The inventors, we'd say, this is a kid who since childhood has always been tinkering and taking things apart, the one that you call up to fix your computer. Come on here, find out what's going on with my computer. We would tell them, look for this kid, and they got it. Yeah, it worked. And so we got some real good press for that, you know, and Scientific American said, oh, we've got this new way of finding teenagers who are creative. Not that many people picked us up on it and did it, but but maybe later. So then we thought we need to help these kids. When they come into our lab, we need to do some kind of different career development. We thought, let's figure out what they need to learn the invisible pathways. We found out that the majority of our CLEO students wanted creative careers, but they didn't know if that was the right choice for them. They didn't know how to get there. Like I said, installation artists, what do you do? Some of them wanted to invent their own career, the organ historian. Most had been discouraged by either parents or teachers or peers from pursuing a creative career. You won't make any money. You're going to waste your student loan. How do you even know that you're any good at writing? How do you know you have the next best invention? All you do is sit around and play video games. That's the kind of stuff they got all the time. Oh gosh, can I tell the Sam story? There's time. Yeah. Okay. All right, now all the time that I was developing these ideas, you know, I had kids that were growing up. When my son was in 6th grade, and my husband and I tried to put some of this stuff to work, right? When my son was in 6th grade, the teacher called us in for a teacher conference. Sam wasn't doing well in most of his courses, except for computers and cartooning. And so she brought us in and said, you know, your son's so bright, 2 professors for parents, he should be doing a lot better in school. She said, but I know what's going on here, it's the video games. Somebody needs to tell Mr. Claiborne that he can't spend his whole life playing video games. But did we go home and tell him that? No, we did not. I went home and I said, now, honey, teacher thinks that you're real involved in video games, and we do too. Listen, where do you think all of those Japanese ideas come from? And he said, well, Mom, he said, you know, video games came right out of Japanese culture. I said, well, why don't you investigate that and find out about the Japanese culture? So he got into that. He read a whole book on the Japanese concept of cute. He's in 6th grade, and he's learning Japanese and telling me all about how this started. And then he traces how the figures from the video games, how they grew out of little Japanese iconic cartoon figures. Oh my gosh. Okay, so here's the $1 million question. What is my son, Sam Claiborne, doing today in his 30s? What's he doing, Felice?
I think he's doing something with videos, right?
Yeah.
Video games. And
He's
what
the-
exactly is he doing?
He's the senior editor with a stable of 40 writers at IGN, the largest video game review website. And how many followers does he have on Twitter? 1 million. So I just have to tell you, we had to practice what we preached. We had to practice it. I was learning as I went along and thinking, our kids are going to get there. We're going to do this for our children, and we're going to do it for these kids too. So we had to validate those techniques, and here are the techniques. So I'm going to run you through a perfect future day, and I want you just to imagine going through it. So you come in, and you're from Greensburg, Kansas, okay? And you've been selected from, usually you go to a school that's consolidated, so it's got like 500 kids in the school, and you and 8 or 9 other kids have been selected as being creative by your, according to the profiles. You've been profiled, but you know nothing else, except it's a career development program, and you're going to take a lot of tests. So they show up, and the first thing we do is we have them sit around in a circle. And by the way, they're often from different schools, too. Like they'll be with some other school like Mays, Kansas, like Mays and Hayes. So they're sitting there, these kids, you know, half of them don't know the other ones. And we ask them to go around, we explain the concept of flow, that consciousness state that one achieves when one is working, pushing the boundary of one's ability in an expertise, in a domain of expertise, whether it's playing the guitar, writing a poem, doing math, when one is pushing the boundaries and where one loses track of time and space. And we say, hey, have any of you ever started a project at 10:30 and say it, you know, I'm going to give myself till midnight, and then the next time you looked up, it was dawn? That's flow. Okay, the kids know what we're talking about. They go around and they talk about their flow experiences. Each one talks about their flow, and then we tie that in with what we know about them already from the assessments they've taken. So that I've got counselors sitting there and going, oh, it's interesting that your flow comes from finely detailed work, because I noticed that your profile looks a lot like you're an archaeologist. And you may not know this, but archaeologists spend most of their time doing extremely detailed, precise work. So we'd be giving them affirmation, especially if their flow was like their career goal, as we went along, and they affirmed one another. Most teenagers are pretty snarky, but not these kids. For the first time, they're with their people, and they go, "Oh wow, you're writing a blog about the old Star Trek. That is so awesome. What's your website?" They're all exchanging websites. They're all exchanging their work. They're thrilled. And meanwhile, we've got all these Tinker Toys on the table, and they're building towers and windmills and stuff as they talk. They take a lot of assessments, state-of-the-art assessments, personality, interests, values, flow assessments, creative accomplishments. And then they have individual counseling with a counselor who has been trained to work with creative people. All my counselors and therapists also have had careers as artists, writers, musicians, inventors. I even have an astrophysicist who quit in her postdoc as an astrophysicist and came to work for us because she wanted to work with creatively scientific people. So they get individual counseling where their tests are interpreted. And what we try to do is we look at their dreams and goals. We say, wow, most of the time their personality's just right for it, so we can affirm them. Sometimes it's a little off, and we go, oh, by the way, you said you wanted to be a lawyer, but according to your profile, if you do that, you're going to end up cutting your throat. So I would suggest that you write about politics, because that looks a lot more like you. You don't need to go into law to be able to do that. Then they do a perfect future day visualization. Felice and I have done this countless times with rooms full of people where you have people, they close their eyes, and by the way, these are teenagers, they get to lay on mats on the floor in the dark with the opposite sex, and they visualize themselves 10 years into their own future on a perfect working day. It's very powerful. Remember, they're very high in absorption, the capacity to fantasize, so their imagination just takes them away. They go into an altered state, even though we don't intend that. Then, after that, we do a lot of interpretation, discussion of that. Then this is the cool part. Then change of venue, they get in their van, and they come down to the makerspace. I'll tell you more about that later. But there at the makerspace, they meet the most amazingly creative people, from carpenters to people who are doing brain hacking, taking EEG toys and hacking them in so you can fly a drone around the room with your mind. They meet writers. They meet all these people at the makerspace. And then they have the experience of flow biofeedback, where we put EEG headsets on them. It's just a very simple commercial-grade headset, and we take them into relaxation, then concentration, then relaxation, and then we ask them to visualize themselves doing their most creative, challenging activity and going into a state of flow. I swear, you can watch their brain waves. You can watch when the violinist hits a problem, like when she hits the wall in her mind, and you can actually see it go into beta as she busy mind, as she's trying to work out, how am I going to get that string? And then you see her work it out in her mind, and you see this huge burst of gamma, which is, by the way, it's enough electricity to light an LED bulb. When you have an aha experience, when you have a breakthrough, when you go into the zone, yeah, you could light an LED bulb. Anyhow, what the flow biofeedback does is it makes it real. You could talk about flow till your face turns red, but they really believe it when they see their own brains in real time turning into one of our geniuses made a visual thing where it's called the brain flower. And the radiance of the petals is the power of the brainwave. And so they see the whole flower turn purple. It's stunning. And then we finish with the personal map of the future. And that's where we sit down with our book on creative colleges, all of our educational consultants, everybody that we know who knows about where the art institutes are, where the great writers schools are, where the great tech institutes are, where the great startups are, where the places are where healers go to go into alternative medicine. Great. And that's what and then they leave. And Paul Torrance said, no, understand, take pride in, practice, develop, exploit, and enjoy your greatest strengths. And we think that what we're teaching them is all of that. These are your strengths. These are your strengths, enjoy them. So it works. We found out that students who attended our lab, weeks afterwards, we found that compared to a control group, they'd increased their exploration. They were actually talking to their parents and saying, I'm going to do this. And by the way, here's how I'm going to earn the money, and this is how I'm going to get the loans. And I'm going to go to University of Iowa to the Writers' Workshop. So there. But they've also called the Writers' Workshop, and they've made contacts, and we have contacts for them. They've gotten in touch by Facebook with the people we've suggested. So they've increased their exploration. They've increased their engagement. Okay, this is crazy. We did not expect this. They actually start doing better in school in all their stuff. We don't get that. We don't know why. And they increase their intuition-based choices. When we ask them about how did you choose this relationship, or how did you choose this, how did you choose that, they say, well, I just feel like I learned how to trust. I learned how to trust that creative process, and I've started going with that. Performance and achievement. Here's what we found about their achievement. 1/3 of the CLEO students had never been identified as gifted, and many were not ideal students. Even those who had been identified as gifted were not ideal students. The achievers, those who had 4-point GPAs, and there were a lot of them. You know, there's about, I'd say, 15-20% of our students do have 4-point. They differed from the underachievers who averaged a 3-point. That's the lowest quartile. You're thinking, oh, that's not so bad. That's a B. Well, guess what? There's no honors program you can get into with a 3.2. You have to have a 3.5. You can't get into any elite college or university with a 3.2. They've got to pull up those grades if they want to have the choices they want. But they're adolescents, and they don't realize that ditching physics class because I hate Mr. Brand is not a good reason to ditch physics class. It's better to go ahead and get a C+ than ditch it and get an F. We found, however, that our underachievers were higher on all measures of creativity than the achievers. Higher in openness to experience, higher in independence, higher in absorption, higher in accomplishments, and higher on all the interest scales. So their interests, in other words, were more fully, maturely developed. Their vocational interests were more mature. And you know, Paul Torrance said, don't waste energy trying to be well-rounded. And we have a caveat for that. We say, don't waste energy trying to be well-rounded, but figure out the bare minimum you have to do to get to the level where you will have maximum freedom for your creativity. We also learned that there continues to be a problem with females, but now the problem is not in STEM. They've caught up. The math gap is closed. That's some mutation for one generation. You know, just a generation ago, they told us that there was a math gene. Yeah, and then we all mutated. The math gap has closed, and now they're saying, oh, spatial visual rotation, females are inferior in that, and that's why they don't achieve as much in engineering. Yeah, well, now females are catching up in that too, so more mutation. Yeah, that doesn't explain what's going on. It's about gender and gender socialization. Women make up only 18%. When I say inventors, that means that their name is anywhere on a patent, and sometimes there's 27 names, and they're almost never first named on a patent. They are only 2% of the recipients of incubator support. Do you know what that means? That means that women who achieve a patent, the ones who actually achieve a patent, in order to then commercialize it, what do you have to commercialize your doohickey that you created? You need capital. And where you get that is by venture capitalists investing in an incubator. 98% of the people running around in those big shiny buildings. Do you have a research corridor with incubators? Surely Athens, Georgia has it. You know, a corridor of high-tech incubators to bring people in and start businesses. Okay, well, a lot of them do. You've heard of the Research Triangle, all that sort of thing. Okay. Well, those big shiny buildings, okay, 98% of the people in there are males. That's a problem. Also, 8% of the paintings in MoMA and the Museum of Modern Art are from women. And despite the high presence in the writing fields, less than 8%, magic word, you're allowed to have 8% on the best lists. So that my husband knows that every time Time magazine or the New York Times comes out with one of those best of the year lists, he knows there will be gnashing of teeth and breaking of dishes. Because I'll go, they've done it again, 8 women out of 100. So I wrote Smart Girls in the 21st Century. And that just came out this year. And you notice I didn't bring the book here because, one of my talents is not entrepreneurship, but go ahead and get it because I put everything that I learned about creative and smart women in this book, and it's this generation. Every word is new. It's about these kids. Not only do we need to acknowledge gender, this is just what Felice was saying, we have to acknowledge privilege. We found out that the more distant kids were from privilege in lots of different ways, the less likely they were to go ahead and fulfill their creative potential. So I developed with my colleague, Karen, a distance from privilege scale that's now being used to find out why there's not more STEM women innovators, because it has to be part of the equation. And all these guys get up there and talk about, you have to have persistence and you have to have, all these wonderful things like grit. Yeah, well, first you have to have some social capital, and then you need some capital. Gathering, creative life can be lonely. This really is the end. That's, by the way, my study during my sabbatical. Look how lonely it looks. And so we decided that we would now expand. And so the most recent thing we've done is to start to create ways of bringing creative people together in community. This is the Chautauqua that I have on my farm, where we bring creative young people and rural farmers together and have them, and the talent is all homegrown. Not a single person from the outside. We just make the talent from the neighborhood and from the kids there. They sit on hay bales. We invited a group of creative kids to come and stay, and they took a chicken coop and turned it into a tiny library and filled it with their books, and they spent the whole time painting, reading poetry to one another. We have overnight groups where people come and stay at my house. By the way, I have 12 beds. If you want to send a team of kids to Cleo's, they can stay at my house. We do equine creative problem solving, where we put groups of young people with horses and give them problems to solve, like catch a horse, and then analyze their creative process. And that's a group up there where we take them into nature and have them learn about natural metaphors for creativity. And finally, the jewel in my crown, the most favorite thing I've ever done is with my friend Eric. I co-founded 3 years ago the Lawrence Creates Makerspace, where we have community classes like brain hacking. That's that thing I was talking about with the EEGs. We have welding, we have wood shop, we have photography shop. And do you think we got big funding for it? No, Eric and I wrote a personal check for 1 month's rent on a warehouse. And we said, if we build it, they will come. And then we sought donations of wood shop, 3D printers from companies and stuff, filled the place with equipment. And after 2 years, charging $20 membership, $20 per month, we became economically sustainable. Meaning Eric and I didn't have to write any more checks. Barry was like, are you gonna charge the makerspace to our credit card? But you can see what a diverse group it is. Look at that, female makers. Look at that, Hispanic, Native American makers. It's pretty awesome. We're pretty proud of that. In fact, we've launched a lot of businesses, and one of them is called Marla's Quilts. And Marla is going to be in Washington, D.C. at the African American Museum because she does quilts of African American history, and she's one of our makers. So that's what we do. We provide studio and event space, and like I said, it's the jewel in the crown. That's the making of the makerspace. if we build it, they will come. When this last year, we were named one of the 25 most interesting maker spaces in the world. And we talk about families. And that's our dreams for the future. We've gone international. We're going to provide our assessments and counseling online. Just trained a bunch of coaches at the World Conference. We're going to do it online, but if people want to send a team to us, we can now put them up. We hope to find an actual house, but if not, I've got a farmhouse. We'll keep putting them up. And we just want to keep on building Kleos and sharing it with the world and making the world safe for creative people. Paul Torrance said, "Why not fly?" Thank you.